This podcast and every other podcast that I make is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. They get episodes of Play, Watch, Listen early, unedited, and ad-free, as well as the opportunity to ask questions for any of the other podcasts that I do and request certain guests. But mostly, if you'd like to support this very independent show that has declined sponsorships for years now, check us out on patreon.com/CharaLanazard. So, hello everyone. Usually we don't intro the show at the start, but it's going to be a beefy one today, and I'm excited.
Meaty.
This is Play, Watch, Listen. That's Mike Biffle. He's a video game director. And that is our friend Rami. Rami, I actually realized that I don't even know how to introduce you at this point. Games industry staple.
Right. Yeah,
Legend.
I actually have no idea how to introduce myself either. I'm an independent game developer. I've been making games for about 15 years. I'm probably best known by gamers for Nuclear Throne, Ridiculous Fishing, which is a game about fishing with machine guns. Some smaller indie games from like 10, 15 years ago, Super Great Box, Lift Trousers. By developers, I'm mostly known as the person who goes around and tries to help developers around the world get access to game development resources. So I'm kind of like two different sides of the coin. So I just kind of do all sorts of things.
Great. I feel better that I didn't know how to describe it. Austin, we just started recording. Welcome.
This is the most professional the show has ever been. I love it.
I hear
Austin
all
Wintory,
that,
video
and
game
I
composer.
thought Rami was just a pilot, a burgeoning, emerging pilot, and all the rest of that feels like very kind of peripheral.
I do enjoy flying airplanes a lot, but it's a recent thing.
You're the only person I know
such a cool thing you do.
You're the only person I know who spent like 50 million hours in Microsoft Flight Simulator and then was like, time to raise the bar.
Let's go.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, is that how that happened?
The graphics suck.
But, I mean, so when I was really, really young, I really wanted to be a pilot. That was the first thing I ever wanted to be. I wanted to be a pilot because we would go to Egypt, where the rest of my family lives, once a year from the Netherlands. So I would get in the magic tube, and then I would see all the buttons at the front of the magic tube, and then I would get out of the magic tube, and then I would be in Egypt. So that was phenomenal to me, and I wanted to be the people near the buttons.
Fair enough.
And then I got my glasses at like age 6. And my dad, being Egyptian, looked at me and went like, well, there goes your dream of becoming a pilot, because the only way into being a pilot in Egypt is via the military. And the military doesn't accept pilots with glasses because you're getting shot at. And if your glasses fall off, then you're not going to be a really good pilot. So turns out that in commercial aviation and in civil aviation, that's not actually a thing.
Well, you'd hope you're not being
Really
shot.
awesome to not be shot at.
Yeah.
They'll take your money.
Yeah. So I played a lot of Flight Simulator and then went, you know what? Maybe
My
I can do
favorite
this.
was you
I love that.
playing Flight Simulator on a plane with the actual like window open right next to you. That was my favorite little glimpse into your psyche.
Right. That was I flew from Montreal to the Netherlands, and then as we were taking off, I booted up the flight in Flight Simulator and also took off. And then just checked how close it was, and it was terrifying. Like, the stars were correct.
Whoa.
And I was looking outside, I'm like,
I feel
What?
like that would make
It
me
is
feel
super
sick.
impressive.
Like, you know how VR, you'll feel motion sick when your body's intuition about motion you're supposed to be experiencing isn't mapping to what it's telling you and that sort of thing. I feel like the slight inconsistencies between what would be on screen and then the otherwise very similar real-world ambient surroundings would make my brain kind of have a stroke.
Think you're being poisoned.
Yeah.
That's what causes the vomiting. Everyone, that's Austin Wintory. He's a video game composer. And
Whoa, intros up front.
I had to, because we're going to be talking about Unity today, but I was
Shocker.
told aggressively to ask you, Austin, of course, from our good friend Andy Grush, who asked you several times last night, to ask you about the guy that played at the Hollywood Bowl last night. Please don't spend 50 minutes answering this question. I'm aware of the risk.
It's gonna be a long one.
Andy called him the best musician alive.
I was gonna say the same thing. I think
No
he is
way.
quite possibly
Go on. Who?
Jacob Collier. I think he is made of music. You know how in Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon says to Obi-Wan, I think Anakin was made by the Force. I think that is actually accurate about Jacob Collier.
I never even heard of him until Andy said it. He's
pretty niche, because I'm actually blown away that he could fill the Hollywood Bowl, because I think of him as pretty niche because what he does is so superhumanly sophisticated and musically complex. It has it not all of it is. He can do things that are incredibly simple and just gorgeous and laid bare. But he has this heart of a jazz musician, and he has complete and total command over music. I mean, he sings, he plays 1,000 instruments, and he'll do these complex harmonies with himself or with other singers. Like last night, there were 7 and 8 part harmonies with singers where it gets so dense that I just think we live in a world where there's very little mainstream appeal to this kind of music, where everything feels like he's delighting and exploring. Like, you know how you'll watch a high-level tennis player or somebody where it just feels like gravity doesn't seem to apply anymore. They just the flick of a finger and the ball will keep moving, and
That's how I feel recording this podcast. That's my experience of watching you guys.
In your element.
Andy, by the way, Andy Gersh is one half of the Newton brothers, most recently known for composing things like Midnight Mass, the upcoming Fall of the House of Usher, which we're not technically allowed to promote, but have seen and love.
Composers are not forbidden from
in a non-promotional way. When's that coming out?
He's part of SAG. It's coming out on October 12th for your personal curiosity, Mike.
Thank you.
That's true. He is an atypical composer, part of SAG, because he was in every episode of Midnight Mass as the church organ player.
Yeah, he's also in
is that right? Oh, that's
upcoming
fun.
thing. Yeah, which, like I always say, is the best actor in the show, just to piss everyone else off. Because like Michael Trucco and Sam Sloyan with that last night. But he said,
and Rahul,
obviously. He said
was
that
he in Midnight Mass? I don't remember.
Yes, he plays the organ in the church.
I'm joking.
Oh, you mean Rahul? Andy. He said Jacob Collier is capable of singing
everything.
In between keys. Like he's created micro keys.
He didn't create it, but he has such
There are new
control.
keys?
So what
guess?
he's referring to is
It's like Pluto, but in reverse.
the in the world of music. If you think about the fact that all sound can be labeled with a frequency, so you know the A that an oboe player tunes the rest of the orchestra to is at exactly 440 hertz. We call it A440. But if you think about it, all sound exists on this spectrum of wavelengths. It's so the 12-tone chromatic system that is the basis of like the Western kind of conception of music is not an arbitrary, but like a historically evolved carving up of the frequency spectrum, where if you take A440 and you go down to A220, exactly an octave lower, the 12 steps in between exist at very specific frequencies. But it makes sense if you think about it intuitively that is just a sort of
Obvious,
arbitrary
Rami. Don't
codification.
smirk. This is all obvious. Come on.
But if you think
I
of
love
it,
this. I love this. This is great.
it's points on a line where you're putting little dots on that line, but you could theoretically do them any which way. There's why you have what we would call microtonal music, where people start to say, well, what about the notes in between those? Or what if we structure the scale differently? What's the difference between even-tempered and mean-tempered, where maybe the distance between those notes, even within the same 12 notes, the distance between them might be subtly different. And this is where you start to get into acoustics of different types of instruments.
Well, can I ask the ignorant question then, which is, what's the element of this that's impressive then? Because obviously anyone can be off. Like anyone can hear frequency. Is it the artistry of then making that sound good when you are off piece? Is that basically where it comes from?
That's a pretty good way to kind of cut to the chase. Because if you sing.
Wasn't my intent.
If you swing, but I don't actually want to belabor the point because I am very curious all of your comments on Unity. But the idea of microtonality, it's to a Western ear, it's extremely easy for that to just sound out of tune because you might be, we measure the difference, the distance between the notes on the keyboard with what we call cents, like 1/100ths of a half step, like cents of a dollar. And so from C to C sharp, you've got 1 cent, 2 cents, 3 cents. So like most people would need a computer to go, oh, that's C sharp plus 8 cents, because you're talking about such a tiny fraction between the notes. And Jacob seems to just, like I said, he's made of music. There's no amount of precision he can't keep up with.
Wow.
It literally, never mind that he plays so many different instruments. So he did this arrangement that of the classic Henry Mancini song from Breakfast at Tiffany's, Moon River, where he did this like 2-hour walkthrough of his arrangement on YouTube that I was watching a couple years ago or a year ago, whenever it was. And I remember hearing the kind of apex, the big glorious climax of the piece where it just sounded really special. And I for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why. And it turns out it was because he wanted it to have a certain quality where he goes, the only way I could achieve that is by peaking on the chord G half sharp major. So he's landing on a key, and there's like 100 parts all simultaneously of different singing and whatnot that are all perfectly in tune with each other. But if you were to play it up against someone playing a G sharp, it would sound violently dissonant, like one of these two is really wrong. But he gets there so smoothly and gradually, you don't even realize the trick he's pulling on you, which is why I didn't clock it when I heard it, before kind of analyzing it.
But the artistry is kind of sneaking that past the Western ear. It reminds me of
sneaking it past a composer, right? Like,
it reminds me of when you like hero narrative, like the hero's journey, the cliche story. There's an argument. There used to be an argument that they're all stories.
I'm going
to
be Mike for a second.
There you go, hero with house
nice.
spaces, right? A lot, and it's not the only story. There's a million different stories, but it became so popular that was the only story that we basically are now in a world where for about 40, 50 years, most, especially American, but most kind of Western cinema in general has been telling that story. And now there's an argument that it's not that story is quintessentially human. It's that we have generations now that's the only story they know how to receive. So if you don't hit the beats of the hero's journey,
people think something's wrong with the storytelling.
People think something's up. People are like, you've missed the note there. I'm expecting this to fall exactly there.
Right. Yeah.
And the stories we celebrate now are arguably much less diverse than they were before Star Wars. But now the artistry is in how much can you put a bit of spin on that ball? How much can you, I'm mixing so many metaphors, how much can you kind of play with the rules and get it past people? Something like, if you look at like Nolan and how much, how beloved he is by film nerds, a big part of that is that he is structuring his movies in a way that they're still basically following that hero's journey, but he nudges things around enough, and that's why it kind of fits. But arguably his films are much less interesting story-wise than the broad range of movies we had again before 1977. Anyway, Austin, sorry, I just thought there was an analogy there in how you're talking about this composer, this musician.
The only other thing I would add, I was with a friend of mine who is a genius in his own right, a guy named Mike Miller, at the concert last night.
I thought you were going to say Bethel.
Sorry, different Mike, different genius Mike.
Sorry. Genius.
Thank you.
And Mike had a brilliant analogy, because I always found myself thinking,
thank you.
What Jacob does is so on a level that it's hard to truly appreciate, even as a musical professional, which is why I always thought he was kind of niche, because it's sort of like, to a lot of people, it probably just sounds exhausting because he's just so complicated in what he does.
You need a level of literacy to spot what's going on, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Mike.
but I was really wrong because, it was like 15,000 people there last night that were off the hook for him, like a total rock. And he's an incredible performer, so energetic, running back and forth, playing all these instruments where he'll start singing and he'll be with one of his other singers and run and sit at the piano and just whip out this incredibly virtuosic piano thing, then jump over onto the drums, and he never stops moving. So on a basic, superficial level, it's just exhilarating to watch. But the point that the other Mike made was, he said, imagine a painter that could see into like the X-ray spectrum or into the infrared spectrum and what they would paint that we wouldn't even know they were painting because we physically cannot see it. But it exists. That is essentially, I thought, the best analogy I'd ever heard to Jacob Collier. It's like he just has access to senses that most
his
people
color
don't.
gamut is broader than yours.
Yeah.
And he said the same thing. That's nuts. Like someone I'd never even heard of. Austin, would you say that watching Jacob Collier live had like the opposite effect on you as watching what Unity did this week?
Oh, I thought you were going for, did you find that the audience kind of really came together in a unified way? I thought that was going to be...
That was better. I should have done that. Damn.
That was really good.
That's what I thought you were going with.
It was really good. It was one of the best... It was one of the best shows I think I've ever been to. Ever.
Yeah, it sounds incredible.
Arguably, and sorry, usual disclaimers, this is all my opinion. I'm not breaking any NDAs by anything I'm going to say. Please take everything I say as a statement of my personal opinion and not fact. But what's interesting here is that Unity have done a similar thing where they've found a new way to expand a EULA. It's incredibly impressive.
To a point.
To a new dimension.
They can see layers of agreements that we don't even remember making. It's incredible.
Rami, could I have you, just for people who totally aren't familiar, who've clicked on this because they're like, what's this Unity thing game devs are upset about? What is Unity and why are people upset?
All right, so Unity is a game engine. It's the programs that game developers use to make games in. Unity is one of the larger ones. It's mostly used by independent developers, mobile developers, VR developers use it a bunch. And it has traditionally always been one of the more accessible options. It's taught a lot in education. A lot of developers grow up with Unity, and a lot of the indie games that you might have heard of and love are also built in Unity. And now every engine sort of has its own model of how they make money. So you have something like a Game Maker, which has a yearly subscription. You have Pico 8, which are these tiny little cute games where you just have a one-time payment. You have Unreal, where Unreal games basically up until $1 million pay $1 million in revenue. They pay nothing, and then afterwards they pay 5%, or they can make a custom deal with Unreal. And Unity, until a few days ago, the business model that we were aware of for Unity was effectively there's 3 separate layers that you can use, and besides that there is nothing. You don't pay more. You pay those license fees, and those could be yearly or free. And then that was it. And Unity,
how do they differentiate between like what allowed something to be free?
So
I'm making the worst mistake in engine marketing ever.
Mike is actually 100% correct. One of the most one of the best stories I think about Unity and Unreal is that under the Unreal license, if you use the free version, you're not actually supposed to put the Made in Unreal logo in front of your game.
No way.
But if you take one of the commercial licenses, you have to put the logo in front of it. That is part of the deal. Unity said, if you use the free version, you have to put the logo in front of the game. But if you pay for it, you can opt out. So the result is that only really professional commercial Unreal games have the logo in front of it. And basically every hobbyist, enthusiast, like any person who's just starting in Unity has the Unity logo in front of it, which is why most people think that Unity makes bad games and Unreal makes great games.
I have never known what you just said over the last 45 seconds, and that blows my mind. That's
why the podcast exists, Austin. That's why the
seriously,
podcast
for
exists.
real.
I didn't know that
That's
either.
why people are here.
That was a really fascinating bit of like 2 different marketing notions, and just seeing what happens when they play.
Well,
out.
that's got to mean that Unity was trying to appeal to indies, right? In theory.
That was their initial angle for sure. They were trying to be. They were making a very smart play, and it's reasonable. Like, so, you know, all of our games are Unity from day one. Yours, Rami. Did you ever ship? You did lots of Game Maker stuff. Were you ever in Unity?
We did Game Maker. We used open frameworks. We used Objective-C, and my most recent game, Ridiculous Fishing EX, is actually in Unity.
And that game is coming out when?
That game is out, available right now on Apple Arcade.
How do you feel about that?
Please don't install that. Please do not. Just don't get it.
Don't buy it. It will cost Rowdy money. But
oh god.
But no, but Unity definitely for years made a really good play, and that's the kind of the heartbreaking side of what's happened. I know we still haven't gotten to what's happened. We'll get there. But like with Unity has always been very open to new developers. Like they've been. I only started using Unity because they ran a great London meetup basically, and I went there as a way of meeting nerdy people in my area. And then eventually got into the scene enough that I made Thomas Was Alone. Like that was kind of my entry point. They're very, very friendly to people starting out, which is a really smart long-term play, because then you end up in a situation where you create a career like they did for me. And now, I've got, 20 people working for me. We've all got licenses for Unity Pro. We're all building it out, and they make a sizable amount of money from us, as they should.
Do they historically have good support? Like, are they good about supporting indie devs or new starters?
They were, again, like, scale has been a challenge, I think, for Unity, and I think Unity probably, I think that's also a reason behind what's going on right now is I think they were very good at the start, and then they just got very, very successful, basically, and I think didn't necessarily scale that support.
I read an article today that said on Steam, I don't know what the sample size, like it felt like this is nowhere near enough of a total to be representative of all of Steam, because I would think there are many millions of games on Steam, but I don't, but it said something like, whatever the sample was in the article I was reading, it said something like 70,000 games were made in Unity versus 10,000 in Unreal.
Yeah.
Like, it's just...
That sounds like the right ratio. That sounds like the right ratio.
80%-ish would be my guess.
Yeah. I was floored at that.
Well, because every professionally built Unity game on that list, as Rami said, doesn't have the logo at the start. None of my games have a Unity logo. Actually, Thomas Was Alone might. I can't remember if Thomas Was Alone.
I'm just amazed that it's that imbalance between the two.
You wouldn't see these.
But it just,
that's because Unity was very good at...
It would really not be an exaggeration to say that Unity is the most popular game engine in the world in terms of just like games coming out. There's not even Unreal is not even close to competition.
I mean, if you factor in mobile, then by many.
Also, sorry, just as an aside, because I found it very interesting. Apparently, there aren't even 100,000 games on Steam. I also would have thought there were millions of games on Steam, and apparently that's because things get pulled so frequently. Like, people stop studios making them stop supporting them. But the most recent statistic I can find, which is I'm corroborating by 5 separate sources here, is from 2021 saying 50,300.
That seems impossible, because I thought there was like over 1,000 a month
a day or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Not on Steam. There's not 1,000 a day on Steam, but on Android, on iOS and Android, probably something around that range. Like, there's a lot of games being made.
Also, it's exponential growth, so there are a lot of years when you're thinking about, well, Steam's been around for this long and it's this a day. It's it's sped up over time.
That's how I measure it. Is I remember when Banner Saga 1 came out, which was in summer of 2014. The guys at Stoic told me, it was like 33 games came out this month on Steam, and then by the time Banner Saga 2 came out, it was about tenfold. I think it was like 300 game, and then by the time Banner Saga 3 came out, it was like this month where 1,000 had come out. So I just
it's a really funny way to measure it.
2012,
they were
Thomas
looking
Was
at their
Alone was on the front page for
competition.
2 weeks. Because there was just nothing else coming out, and that's how that generation of indies, got where we are. Was basically we were the only fish in the sea.
That was it. But of all the games that Austin is mentioning that are coming out, just the overwhelming majority are Unity. Just to make clear what the scale of Unity is and what the importance of Unity is. So the Pro license and the old Plus license, which now doesn't exist anymore, basically developers pay per user, per seat, as Mike said before, and that's just a fancy way of saying per user at the studio.
How much? That could get pretty high.
It can get
$2,000 a year.
Yeah.
Each?
$2,000 a year. Yeah.
Per seat. Yeah.
Wow.
Which is actually, to be clear, quite a low number. Like, in terms of when you think about the associated costs of an employee, $2,000 for the software they use that does all the stuff Unity does is actually very
Premiere
reasonable.
Pro is like super expensive and like that.
But also just think about the scale of the profitability of a game based on the fact that it's in an engine which is well supported. Like, there's, to be clear, none of, I think, most developers, or at least most kind of at the professional level kind of developers, wouldn't necessarily have a problem with Unity switching over to a royalty-based system. No. That's not what they did, though.
That's not what happened. So you had Unreal, which says we're free until 1 million, and then we ask 5% of your revenue. And you had Unity, which said...
one moment, Rami. The crucial thing there is only over the million, so that's like a tax bracket.
Right.
So if you make $1,001,001, they want 5 cents.
Yeah. So the first million, they don't charge 5%.
Oh, wow.
Anything after that million, they charge 5% over.
No way.
So that's how Unreal has always done it. And how Unity always did it is it's free. And if you want access to the pro licenses and, the advantages that are attached to it, they pay per seat. And some of those advantages were, better support. You can remove the logo at the front. Like, there was enough value there that a lot of studios...
Did you say that was per year?
That is
like
per year.
The $2,000 or whatever per year?
$2,000 per seat per year.
What's interesting is when I first got into Pro, when I first started using Pro, it was a 1,000 one-off payment, I think.
Right.
So obviously things have changed since then. But yeah.
It still shows though,
For
like
the last decade,
the idea is
if
you're betting on yourself and you're presuming, hey, my game's going to be a giant hit. Unity is that model is way more profitable for you than a 5% cut off of your 30% platform cut down.
If you make a hit.
If you're making a hit and you're just like rolling the dice.
The most game developers pick their engine by what they want to make, right? Like, I think for most developers, the business model has never really been the biggest consideration in choosing what tool you use. Like, if you can't afford it, sure. But, like, if you're making a game, Unreal is free to start. Unity is free to start. Game Maker costs $50 a year. Pico is like $15 total. Like, the cost was never really what people are looking at. What people look at is, okay, does this tool fit with what we want to do? You want to do an Unreal game, that you're probably doing something photorealistic, or you're looking for that sort of like scale collaboration tools. Unity, mobile, indie, smaller teams, usually people that are working with more juniors, because you get most juniors trained with Unity right out of school, right? So
because of that great outreach we talked about earlier, like Unity have played this very well for a decade and have built and that's a big part of it as well, is what you come in with the skills on. Most people who make one game in Unreal make 5 games in Unreal, and most people who make one game in Unity make 5 games in Unity. Like, if you're once obviously as you're building up those skills as a developer, you tend to stick to what you know, unless circumstance makes you switch over, or the game you're making drastically changes in something where the strengths or weaknesses of one engine or the other come into it. But I would say, honestly, over the last few years, there has been kind of a closing of that gap on a lot of levels between Unreal and Unity. Like, in terms of what to choose, it's been a harder decision, I think, for the last few years. I'd say Unreal is now kind of pulling forward with some of their technology, but for a long time there, like, Unreal had sanded off a lot of the edges that made them unattractive to like a mobile developer, for example.
Right.
I don't know anything about engines. For reference, Santa Monica Studio uses proprietary engine. Unreal's really good about like upscaling. Like, Unreal's very good for art.
Yeah. Unreal is probably your graphics choice, right? If you're going for but also to be precise, they're good for specific types of art styles. Like, for a lot of 2D art, for example, I wouldn't touch Unreal. Like, I wouldn't start on Unreal. Like, Unity has better 2D implementation than Unreal has. So really, when it comes to engines, what teams are looking at is, what does our team know? What have we used? What do we have like legacy code in? Our old code, what is it in? Does the engine fit what we need? Usually you only see engine switches when they're necessary, because they're expensive. You retrain your team, you have to restart your knowledge base, like, you have to learn how to collaborate in that tool. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of time. So Unity decided that their current business model is kind of unsustainable, which I frankly don't think they're wrong, right?
I think that's probably true. Yeah,
it's probably true, right? Like, they're free for the overwhelming majority of users, and even if
and
one
for
of
the
those
users who can pay, they're also overwhelmingly free, because we're talking about, if you're making a team with the pro version with 20 people for 2 years, that costs you 40 grand. Sorry,
40 grand.
80 grand. 80 grand. 20 2 years. 80.
Yeah.
So 80 grand. Which honestly, if you're making a game with that many people over 2 years, you are aiming to make significantly more than 80 grand at release. So the number is basically the number isn't really. They could be charging us more, which I assume is where this conversation started, for sure.
Right. So Unity was kind of unsustainable. I think that is not an unfair assessment. And as Mike said, like, really their income sources, their income streams were fairly limited. Now, they have their own ad technology that you can implement. That was apparently a large part of their income over the last few years. But on the normal rank and file developer, on the indies, the double A's, a lot of the triple A's, they were just making not a lot of money.
And of course, Apple have jumped down the ads route as well, so that's kind of blocked that revenue stream.
Quite additional pressure on them.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So Unity came up with an idea. They needed to make more money, and they basically have a number of very common options, like the revenue share that Unreal uses. Unity decided to innovate, to really push,
to disrupt,
really push the envelope here.
Yeah,
it's worth inserting that their earlier money-making notion of buying Weta, I don't think has
that didn't pan out so well.
I don't think that
It's
has earned them a lot of like mailbox money, apparently.
Yeah.
No, and there were some other I don't know how much of that is NDA, but there were some other approaches they took to try and increase revenue streams as well. This definitely wasn't their first idea, but it's definitely their worst idea.
They came up with something new. Something that has never been tried in the games industry, because it is just by all means, by every perspective, a terrible idea. I think my guess of what happened is they looked at games like Genshin Impact, like some of the biggest games made in Unity, some of the most popular games in Unity, and went, how can we make money off of this? And they came up with the idea of, instead of saying we're going to make money by revenue, they said we're going to make money per install. And that at first glance, that might sound like it makes sense, right? Somebody downloads a game, they install it, and then Unity's deal is if you made over $200,000 and have more than 200,000 downloads, or installs, to be precise, installs, you start getting charged 20 cents per install. So you would say, okay, per user, that's 20 cents. But when Unity says install, they do mean install, which means that if a user installs, uninstalls, and installs again, that would technically trigger another 20 cents. Or if a user upgrades their computer and installs the game again, that's 20 cents. If they install it on 2 computers, that's 20 cents. And that's 40 cents. That's not that bad, right? But take, for example, a free-to-play game.
Yeah.
Free-to-play game have millions of downloads, right? To be at a point where you have $200,000 in revenue on a free-to-play game, you're looking at 5 million plus installs, right? That's $1 million in costs.
It's just so baffling because it's.
Oh, we're only at layer 1, Austin.
It's just one of those where I found myself going. It's like a fine because there's no, like you said, free to play is the ultimate demonstration of this. There's no revenue to the developer associated with an install unto itself. So the notion of monetizing that feels like a punishment for something. It doesn't really feel like
you don't want people to install your game.
I just kept assuming I was missing.
Please don't install. Please
don't buy your Rabbi's games until this is resolved.
You
please
can
do
buy
not buy
the
our
game.
games.
Please buy the game. Do not install.
Just don't play it.
Steam. I saw someone make the joke that Steam users are like way ahead of the curve on this one. We've been buying games and not downloading them forever. Like that's fine.
I've been helping out a lot of Unity devs, to be honest.
You're a hero, Alanah.
Keep that up. Keep that up. Just
but Rami, what happens? What is there any kind of business model or very popular way of funding indie games that would in any way conflict with this?
Oh yeah, there
some kind of bulk.
There is. Yeah, something where they pay once and then in exchange the game might be free for users.
Let's say it was so successful it was how a majority of indie games are probably funded in the current moment.
Something like
a pass.
Pass, yeah. So Game Pass basically is completely wrecked by this, right?
Yeah.
The effective way a Game Pass deal works is a developer gets a lump sum of money, and then in exchange the game is available as a download for free for subscribers of Game Pass for a specific period of time.
What a
millions of
negative.
people.
Yeah. So Game Pass is now terrifying. But when you sort of like think through this, what makes people reinstall games? Well, or what makes people install games multiple times? Well, demos that you can unlock or demos that you can expand make people install games multiple times. Updates make people reinstall games, right? Actually, updates is a fairly big one. Like, it's now a risk to update. It's now a risk to offer.
You're incentivized not to.
Yeah, because people might reinstall your game.
Or just like I bought a Steam Deck, and I played Cult of the Lamb like back and forth between my PC and my studio.
Cult of the Lamb who've done an announcement saying they're pulling the game. They're not, obviously, but they're doing the joke.
I love that. Yeah, they said buy Cult of the Lamb now because we're deleting it on January 1st, which I actually kind of wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Which is when this comes into effect, is January. But we're only on the first level. Sorry,
right. So that is problem 1. Problem 2 actually is something Alanah just kind of pointed at, which is okay. They pull the game January 1st, right? That should stop it, right? But it doesn't. Because under these terms, it's the installs that count. So even if we stop selling the game or we pull the game entirely, people can still install the game.
We are not able to remove our game
Oh
fully.
my
So if you buy a
God, you're
Steam
right.
game and then I take it off the platform, that you can still download it from Steam because you should be able to. You paid for it. It's reasonable. It's a good consumer-focused decision.
Right.
But it does mean I'm screwed in that situation.
Also, DRM-free builds now, absolutely unacceptable for any Unity game. So if you like DRM-free games, you like updates, you like games as a service, you like games that update frequently, all of those business models are under severe pressure.
Why does
And
it
let's
affect
not forget
DRM?
the most DRM-free of all, piracy.
DRM-free is dangerous because it means that anybody can download the game and install it on as many devices as they want.
And Unity was to be able to track that?
So Unity says...
That's layer 2. We'll get to layer 2 in a moment.
We'll get there.
That's layer 2.
Or layer 3. But...
That might be layer 3. You're right.
Onions, etc.
Basically, one of the things that really happens here is developers don't traditionally track installs for a variety of reasons. Some of them that we can't.
What's the most important reason we don't track them, though? It's technically impossible to fucking track them. That's the main reason we don't.
There's not really a way to do it that doesn't violate a whole bunch of laws.
Right, privacy issues.
And that's layer 2 is it is impossible to track installs of a game without lying or breaking the law.
Right.
To our understanding of the technology in the current moment. It is possible, and I, of course, in a good faith way, assume that Unity have invented a new technology that allows for this.
Right, in the past 24 hours, by the way.
In the last 24 hours. From my professional experience, it is currently impossible to track how many times. I don't know how many times any of my games have been installed. Rami doesn't know either.
I don't know why you need to know. Why do you
would
care?
think. Yeah.
Right.
So there's
Why
the
would
reality
you have
is
cared?
to track an install you would need. Sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say. I mean, I imagine it would be one of those that if there was some way to do it that wasn't, like creepy spyware style privacy violations, I imagine it is actually very useful information to a developer if there wasn't just some horrible way to achieve it.
Oh,
like,
if we could,
I would think it would be.
Don't get me wrong. Game developers love metrics. If we could do it without being creepy, we would have done by now.
Right.
It would also, it's worth saying, it would also be the ultimate anti-piracy tool. If you could track installs, you would be able to block any install done without your permission. So we would have removed piracy from the industry many years ago if this technology actually existed.
Right, I see it.
So to expand on that, say we don't have a good way of tracking installs, right? Or we could track the number of installs, or we could estimate the number of installs. We could get fairly close, right? We can probably do that. We can call home every time somebody installs a game, or try to call home everybody installs a game.
Breaking international data protection laws.
That's
fine. We're the tech industry. We can play with those rules.
So DRM becomes an issue. Like, not having DRM effectively means that anybody can install the game as oftentimes as they want, and we don't actually have any rights management, because that's really what DRM means. We don't have the ability to withhold an installation from somebody, right? The way DRM works now is that you can install the game but then not run it. That's a financial liability now, because if somebody really doesn't like me for something I said on, some social media at some point...
You're very non-confrontational on the internet.
I
don't see anyone ever taking against you. You've never been controversial anyway.
Once that I've heard of.
Never. No, absolutely not. Say somebody doesn't like me, what they can do is they can spin up 1,000 virtual machines and just install the game on all of them.
Yeah.
And that's the scariest part is and who are the people making Unity games, or who are a subset of the people making Unity games? People from protected groups, people who feel uncomfortable on the internet, people who are being attacked.
It could be the new review bombing.
There's a whole rate.
Yeah, install bombing.
Way worse than review bombing.
Way more.
You could literally put Rami into $500,000 of debt.
You ruin people's lives.
Virtual computers.
Please do not download Ridiculous Fishing EX and install it. Just
not download any of Rami's games.
Just buy them.
Just buy them.
Download mine as long as they were published by someone else.
So we get into a lot of weird problems, right? The first real layer, as Mike refers to them, is the legal one. The way of tracking these games is non-precise. We don't have any way of saying this number is correct, and developers have no way to verify the amount that Unity gives them. We don't know. Unity says they have a proprietary model that they can't describe, So,
which they have said in public that they have a model and they won't tell us what it is.
Sounds
Right.
That
illegal.
was a tweet that's been deleted.
I mean,
Yeah.
Technically, their proprietary model, their model for telling us how many installs there are is trust me, bro. Like that's the model.
As you fork over money, small indie dev with low revenue.
Right. Exactly.
Well, but why are they saying? Because I remember seeing them say 90% of people who use Unity won't be affected by any of it. That's because of the 200,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That also means that 10% of
Their defense
Unity,
is, don't worry, 90% of you are not going to be financially successful enough for us to bother.
Your games aren't good
Right.
enough. Don't worry about it.
but like they said 90%, and I'm guessing they made
That
this
could also be
statement.
nonsense, right?
90% means 10%
We
are.
don't know.
We
Yeah.
just described that Unity is the most popular game making tool on earth.
True.
10% of those people are now at
Thousands.
financial risk because of how this works. And literally, we have no valves. We have no way of shutting this down. We can't stop this. We can't stop installs. We can't block installs. So there comes part 2 of the legal part.
Before you move on to part 2, is the other aspect just to point out there, because I know we talk to a broad audience here who often aren't game developers. 200,000 on an individual by individual basis, obviously a lot of money. 200,000 as the gross income from a video game is very low. Because if you think about, like, you know, how many people work at a games company, how long they work on a game for, 200,000 is not an impressively big number. So most indies, any indie that you, as someone listening to this, have heard of or have played their game, chances are they are very close to or well over that line. It's just worth pointing out because I think 200,000 is one of those numbers that sounds very big when we think of it in an individual context, but for a games company, that is not.
It's one of the weird
a hard threshold to cross.
Yeah.
You know?
It's one of the weirdest things that you have to learn when you become you found a studio. Is you have to put the one hat on and go to the supermarket and go like, wow, $3 for Coca-Cola.
I'm not spending $3 on this lettuce. Yeah.
Right, and then you put on the other hat and you're like, well, 300,000, not sure if we can do that. You know, like it's
It's
really
not.
weird.
It stops being your money. I think. Yeah,
Right.
We've been through a similar journey on that, haven't we? It's
Right.
definitely like it's a completely different thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So Mike is right. 200K on a game is not a lot. And that is usually 200K. This is revenue, right? So this is before costs, before taxes, before any of that.
Where you've paid your team.
Before any of that. It's
Before
that.
the platform gets their 30%.
Oh my
That's
god,
right.
that
NDA
too.
by
Of
not
course.
saying which platform we're talking about.
So your revenue can be $200,000, but for a lot of independent
Wait.
developers,
It's pre-platform costs also.
it's revenue.
Yeah.
Well, but
Those are
I
separate
think
things.
of the developers. I guess you're talking like true gross revenue.
Right.
In my mind, it was the revenue coming into the studio, which would be after the platform cost.
For the
But-
purposes of any business conversation, always assume the other guy, the number that best serves the other guy is usually the one you want to assume.
Right.
But that really is nuts because now you're charging where a huge. I mean, that 30% is not a small amount of the money that a thing could be
Right.
making. That Steam and whatever else are taking. So like that makes this
but
even worse.
Even if you don't count that, taxes, salaries, hardware
sure.
investments, all of that, like out of a game development, as soon as a game hits 200K,
Your
we're
Unity
usually
subscription, which you're still paying in this scenario,
done. Right.
as well.
They
of
didn't
course.
stop that.
That's not stopping. No.
Wow.
So there's that part, right? Then there's actually 2 other legal parts to this, which the first one is this is a change that actually, let's start with the other one, the installs, right? Unity originally said that every install and reinstall would count. After the initial backlash to this, they actually said, okay, it's only the initial install that counts. And the reason they said they could not track whether it was an install or reinstall is because there is no way of tracking that. The next day, they backtracked on that and said they do have a way of tracking. The problem is for that to work, install tracking already isn't entirely accurate. But for that to work, they need to be able to tie the install to a person.
They don't have that technology, would be my assumption based on the current situation.
Plus, if they're tying it to any identifying information, including an IP address, that is a violation of European law.
Which we're definitely not accusing them of, Rami, right? We are talking hypothetically about the way
is
someone
purely
could do
speculating.
this.
You and your British
We're
libel laws.
speculating.
100% hype. I'm in the Netherlands. I can say this, but y'all might not. So
That
I'm in
is
the
just
UK,
a
I
Mike
definitely
problem.
can't.
So
Right.
they've been pretty specific. Yesterday they tweeted how we define and count installs is assuming the install and revenue thresholds are met. We will only count net new installs on any device that starts January 1st. So you guys are fine until then. Then you aren't. Reinstall charges, we are not going to charge a fee for reinstalls, which means that they can tell if something has been reinstalled. Like, that is a lot of data.
That is a lot of data.
Fraudulent installs charges, we're not going to charge a fee for fraudulent installs. We'll work directly with you on cases where...
Again,
I mean, this is stuff they need to say.
How would we know what a fraudulent install of a DRM-free game is?
So for basically, Alanah's going to
know?
read this list, and just for every single thing that Alanah's going to read, just think, how would they know? Right?
Yeah, it's also, I suspect all of this stuff is just response to the feedback, and they didn't plan to do any of this originally. So trials, partial play demos, and automation installs, develop charges, we are not going to count these towards your install count. How would they know? Early access games are not considered demos. Web and streaming games, that makes sense. Charity-related installs. The pricing change and install count will not be applied to your charity bundles.
And the charity one is particularly interesting.
It's my favorite.
Define charity for me, because if you're going to charge me 20 cents for every install that isn't charity,
I'm starting a Mike Bithell charity.
I'm really excited. Save the Children are getting 19 cents from every game I ship from now on, right? Because then it's a charity game.
Every game's going to become a charity game.
Right.
It would be hilarious.
Genuinely, that's a possible outcome.
Wouldn't that be so funny if, like, it just becomes the most charitably given year in human history because of this just, like, funneling of...
So
Unity actually, like, played the bad guy to be like, God, here, save the world.
The charity
they're the
one...
Joker to all of our Batman. Yeah, it works.
The charity one happened because somebody did the calculus on what happens when a really well-meaning indie developer that has $200,000 in revenue would add their game to one of those big charity bundles that happened over the last few years. And one of them, the bundle against racial inequality and injustice, took place a few years ago. That had 800,000 downloads. So if you are an indie developer just hit their $200,000 revenue, right? We just hit that. That will give you 600,000 qualifying downloads. 1/5 is that is almost 150K. If that happened after you pay your taxes, you're not back. You're out of business. You're in debt. Yeah. You're in debt to Unity.
Yeah.
Because you tried to help a charity. So now Unity came in and
genuinely, if this isn't resolved, anyone who's got a game in Game Pass right now will have to get it removed before January, because that alone will sink a number of studios.
Yeah. And not just that, free-to-play studios will have to find a way to deal with this. I actually talked to one free-to-play studio before that calculated that their margin, basically their per install revenue, right? Because how free-to-play companies do it this day, calculate their full revenue and then divide that per user to see what their per user revenue is 18 cents.
Dead.
So at a 20-cent cost, that's per user, not per install, right? A user can install it multiple times. This company would go out of business.
Yeah.
I was reading an article
instantly
where
be bankrupt.
This article from GameDiscover.co in his newsletter, he was like, this is not normally what I talk about, but this does sort of relate. And there's a quote in here from a developer that had posted something on Reddit where they said, our studio focuses on mobile games for kids. We don't display advertising to kids because we are against it and we don't fucking want to. And the only way to monetize those games is through in-app purchases, which we should be in charge of. We should be in charge to decide how and how much to monetize those users, not Unity. But according to our last year figures, if 2024 were to be the same as 2023 was, or 22, I assume, Unity would be owed 109% of the revenue of our company.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because of this, and I think it was specifically because of the mobile terms of in-app purchases and the specifics around the language of how those various things are being counted towards these numbers and whatnot, like the different business models.
And
where
it hits every level. It hits every level, from free to play to indie. The one group that makes Unity games that will not be negatively impacted by this is the gambling companies who are exempt.
Yep.
Who are exempt. They don't have to pay 20 cents. If you make, that's the other out.
Why?
Salavir's way ahead of the game on this by announcing this game.
Why are they exempt?
Yeah, I don't see the
logic.
logic.
So much money from them.
Because Unity makes a lot of money. Yeah.
Gambling
they don't want to de-incentivize the gambling?
I guess.
Wow.
I actually haven't quite figured out why it's exempt, but it's probably because with the gambling world, they're making deals with really large corporations.
Yep.
And larger companies, and they probably have their contracts like hammered down in ways that we don't.
There are just so many
that's the next
yikes
layer.
here. And one
So
question that I keep wondering is the fraudulent one gets me, because surely people will try to do that, right?
Oh,
if
absolutely.
their customer service doesn't respond immediately, I imagine you still have to pay all those fees, and then what, you just wait around for a refund even though you're already bankrupt?
We'll be given an opportunity to contest for a few months, Alanah, if we want to, after we've paid.
Yeah. And they could say no. Like, and how would you be able to contest it? Because you can't see the installs.
Well, because of black box, I can't count the installs. I don't know. So,
but what if I'm a developer and I am after January 1st on the hook for all this, and I just decide, fuck that. I just won't, like, what is their enforcement mechanism? Do they have some way to sabotage I get they could sue me or whatnot, but is there
no. They don't have to sabotage you. They just sue you.
Yeah, I see. So but does that mean that they're currently preparing for what would be presumably thousands of lawsuits? I mean,
if assuming, again, taking a good faith assumption that they've invented a form of install tracking that doesn't break any international data collection laws, they theoretically would be able to shut down all our games. If they have that level of access to our games and the data generated from our games, then they could theoretically shut down our games. They could also stop access, of course, to us using the engine, our subscriptions, all that stuff. So you could kind of hurt us that way. It's a lot. And where it gets even more funny is I know one of the criticisms that was raised was like the Game Pass thing. Their answer to that is they're going to charge Microsoft. I'm really excited to hear Phil's announcement that Microsoft
them going up
is
against Microsoft
this.
is sort of a positive, because like at least if they go up against Microsoft and they ruin Game Pass, which is obviously such an important model for Microsoft, they're going to have trouble there. Like that is not going to be a good corporation to corporation conversation.
Well,
at least they're having it with a big guy.
I would pay exceptional amounts of money to be a fly on the wall for that conversation.
They've already had some, I think.
But the funny thing is, like, I don't know how Unity intends to charge Microsoft for a license I signed with Unity.
True.
Like,
even better. How are they going to? How you didn't sign this license? You signed an earlier TLS. So that's the other legal challenge here.
The next
never
legal
agreed
challenge.
to this.
Yeah. So this is one of the scariest things about this, right? The Unity license has a clause in it that basically has a 12-month commitment period, right? If you use Unity, you commit to agreeing to the terms of service for 12 months, right? And that has to do with when revenue comes in and like their ability to get paid for things, and for you not to screw them over, basically. The 12-month commitment period.
Like, in other words, if you release a game and it makes a shitload of money on week one and then you pull it off the store, you wouldn't be able to get out of them because they're like, you wouldn't be able to say, I canceled the terms.
Right.
That's what the point of that is, I assume.
Yeah. This change was announced in early September 2023. It goes into effect on January 1st, 2024, which actually leaves you no time to disagree with this. You cannot pull out, you cannot cancel, you cannot stop using the Unity services in time for this not to happen. Now, the second part of that is messed up is that the way these terms are worded, it doesn't just apply to games that you are bringing out after January 1st. It applies to any game you've ever launched that uses Unity. So if I decided to use Unity back in 2009 for a thing, that game I now need to install track or figure out a way to make sure that this hasn't gone viral behind my back and is, like making money all of a sudden. Because if it hits $200,000, this starts applying. And at that point, there is actually a way to upgrade so that those numbers go higher. If you go to the pro license, then the numbers go up from 200,000 to 1 million. But, effectively the same thing continues to apply. At some point, if the game gets more downloads than you're generating in revenue, you're going to be losing money.
And that's where it gets really interesting, given how many studios have been bought in the intervening time since making a Unity game. So you now have a lot, even though Rami's absolutely right, Unity largely used by smaller developers, or mobile developers. A lot of those companies did very well with their Unity games and then got bought up by the likes of EA, Microsoft, Nintendo, in the future, like those kind of companies. So now those companies are the ones who are tied to specific legacy games. And yeah, Unity's going to be hitting them up. And
Yeah,
I
it
think
makes
that's already I've already
acquisitions
seen
super
which
unappealing.
studio. Well, there was one
I just don't see
studio
how Unity isn't
who's
gonna
been
get
bought by
sued into
Microsoft who are
oblivion
literally
for this.
doing the good luck meme, because it's like, you're going to go to Microsoft and get money from a game we released in 2011. Good luck. Well done.
Yeah.
Like, give it a go. Yeah.
I also really feel like this isn't legal, and that's because didn't Amazon just get like fined like 500 million just for checking cookies? Like, there's no way that this passes.
We have to assume, Alanah, that they've invented a new technology that makes it legal.
Right. And possible.
In good faith.
And also
possible.
can
In good
figure
faith.
out whether an install is fraudulent
I have
or
to
not,
leave you. I'm
and whether
sorry to
it's
say,
charity or not.
See you later.
Talk
It's the
amongst
charity. It can
yourselves.
tell if it's charitable.
Thanks for hanging out,
Austin.
Austin.
Bye.
Bye.
Always.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's an algorithm that can detect the ethical status of a video game. That's incredible.
Of an
It's going to save a
install.
lot. Think of the amount of time that's going to be saved. I mean, piracy gets solved January 1st.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Again, good guy Unity is the correct take here.
Yeah,
solved
but-
it.
but-
That is our assumption. We have to work under that assumption.
wouldn't you?
Because otherwise I'd be breaking UK law.
so the general sort of like the four major points, right, is that Unity is now technically the only engine where the business model can sync your studio because you're successful. Like
That's a
there is
bullet point for the slide.
There is no
The
engine.
only engine.
Yeah, there's no engine that can bankrupt you because you're doing well, right? Unity now technically can, and it's not technical. I have over 50 developers in my DMs that are looking to jump ship, and a number of them have just run the numbers and gone to like, yeah, that's 108% of
It
our
doesn't take
revenue.
long
It's-
to, right? Like, it really, this is not like fear mongering. And then the first response from Unity was very much like, you're clearly confused by this. No, you're talking to a bunch of maths nerds.
Right.
No
We
one's
ran the numbers.
confused,
We did
yeah.
it twice. We are not confused. What you have said is your policy puts most of us at financial risk.
How
There's a very small
doable is
subset of
it
developers who wouldn't be.
to swap engines? Is that
Well, the
Even
problem is
really
that
We're all
possible?
about to find out.
so the problem is, yes, you can, but it won't help you because it's about installs on games you've already made in the past. It doesn't matter whether
Yeah.
you change
Yeah, and you
now.
You
can't
can
even-
because
damage
can't even
control
pull them.
future projects, but you can't stop this.
you
There's
can't change
already an
anything.
interesting discussion happening. Some preeminent kind of Sheridan's, which is one of the largest game-centric law firms in the UK, I know, is putting some stuff together and looking at it. Like, there's going to be some challenges to this. Again, I'm just commenting on those challenges and not taking a side in those challenges. It's
Man, UK is rough with this.
you like UK. It's scary how careful you have to be with your language. But no, it's So this will be challenged. I do not believe that this happens in January. I can't believe.
Right.
It's astonishing how underbaked this was as an announcement. It is incredibly obvious that the many very smart engineers and lawyers who work at Unity did not okay this.
Right.
This would not have made it past. There's a lot of resignations happening.
this is one
Yeah.
of those
Some known
ones
about,
where
some not.
even if they take
there's a
this
breakdown
back,
there.
the trust is gone. Because
Right.
even if they take it back now, all the people who currently work with Unity should be concerned that they will try and pull something like this again. Like, this is so terrifying for so many studios that I can't imagine a lot of people will want to work with Unity again.
No,
And it's
and a
odd
lot
that
of-
their messaging is, you're confused.
I mean, I think
It's a
what
solid
Unity-
first play. I go
Yeah,
away, come back
see
with
if it
another.
works.
Normally, when I
By the
make
time this
worst-
comes out, they may have gone through 3 more of those posts by the time this comes out. So we'll see.
Normally, when I am making the worst business decision in the history of video games, I would also decide to gaslight the entire industry, like while they're watching. That's just a great idea. But
It's
I don't know, like so the four things that I sort of got stuck on is like it's retroactive. And that's terrifying to me because if they can say now, okay, actually you owe us 20% on a thing you made years ago. Well, their old TOS actually said that you can stick to the TOS you released the game under, right? As long as you stay on as long as you stayed near the version of Unity that you used to develop a game, including for bug fix and stuff like that, that TOS would apply. They quietly removed that clause about a year ago, I think. So that clause just disappeared. And
well,
now
they took
jump on this.
the whole
Right.
TOS disappeared yesterday, right?
Yeah,
As well, online.
Really?
So, yeah.
How does it keep
temporarily.
happening?
Very odd.
It's just a
isn't it?
coincidence, Alanah.
Yeah.
It's just
Oh
a,
my
it's just
God.
an
It was
accidental
because
thing. I'm sure they'll have it resolved soon.
No, they were installing the thing where they can track how many people installed the TOS.
That's right, yeah.
It takes a moment. It's
The
advanced technology.
algorithm thought it was a charity TOS
Right.
and took it down. Yeah, that's what it was.
So the second thing is they're not allowing anybody to bill. Right, you can't say, okay, before this goes in, we stop working with Unity services, we revoke access to, we stop using their services, we stop using their products, and we stop. You can't do that because it happens too soon, and it applies to games that you've already launched under a different license. Number 3, Unity should not be able to charge for something that we don't make any money on and can't control. It's that combination, right? Yeah. Because you can charge us for things that don't make money. That's reasonable. Like, that happens, right? Like, sometimes it's just, okay, I'm going to pay for a Photoshop subscription. I don't anymore, but say I did. And I don't use it. I still get charged. That's a common business.
You're paying rent. You're paying a service then. Yeah.
But we do not have control over this. And the only way for us to get a number is through their proprietary black box model that works by the trust me bro method. And then the final thing is really they really just shouldn't use a thing that doesn't have a limit.
Yeah.
Right? Like, installs are unlimited, uncontrollable. There's no way for us to control them, reach them, revoke them, stop them, block them. We cannot do anything when it comes to installs. So if this starts threatening us, we have no recourse. There is nowhere to go for us besides just watch ourselves go to bankruptcy because our game got popular right at the end of the year where the game made 200K in January, right?
Yeah.
Like,
you would want to not be in those top 10%. You would not want your game to be successful, which is a wild thing for an engine to do.
That's the thing that I don't get. And I definitely, all joking about what I should and shouldn't say aside, like, I do genuinely, and me and Rami have had many conversations over a decade in this vein, but like, I always try and assume that the other person, the other side of the business thing, is probably acting from a position of self-interest, trying to motivate me to work in a certain way. Oh, that clause is in the contract because they're worried I'll do this, or they want me to do that, or whatever.
That's why it's so confusing.
It doesn't incentivize or explain itself in a way where you go, oh, they want us all to make free-to-play games. You know what I mean? Like, that would make more sense. That I could pass. I would understand. Oh, okay, they're incentivizing that. They're trying to push us towards a genre that they believe is going to make them more money. There's no rhyme or reason to this, which is genuinely why it feels stupid.
I'm generally not in favor of assuming that a corporation who's been around and successful for a long time are stupid. Like, a board of people had to work on this. That's what makes it more confusing.
There's going to be an amazing story about this a few years
Maybe
from now.
it was
I want to I want to find out what happened.
How's the policy on this podcast of, like, hearsay things from the grapevine?
We talk a lot of shit.
We talk a lot
just
of
address
shit.
that.
Rami, you can say whatever you like, and I will not. I condone nothing that Rami's about to say.
We've definitely said a lot of incorrect stuff on this podcast.
As a British citizen, I do not know of the truth to any of the validity of anything that Rami is about to say, and I do not support it.
So basically, the grapevine on this is that there has been the idea of finding a way to charge some sort of percentual or like recurring fee for Unity has been in the making for over a year. It's not a new idea.
Which I think is fair enough, right? As you were saying, they needed to change something.
If they'd announced the Unreal royalty, there would have been about 2 hours of Twitter discourse, and then it would have all just moved.
People would have just gone like, darn.
Yeah.
God damn it. But also fair enough.
5%.
I have to get a good
Come
deal.
on.
Yeah.
And then if Unity really wanted to go like, it's less than Unreal, they could have gone 4%. And then,
that would have been that would have been the nice PR win for them. There would have been a mini backlash because the mini backlash to anything major, and there's definitely a segment of game developers who that would cause more expense to, but it would genuinely harm the me's and Ramis more than it would harm
anybody else.
The hobbyists, it's the people who have had financial success that a royalty punishes or takes a reasonable amount of money from
right. And on top of that, they actually another thing that is really baffling to me is they actually expanded your rights under the free license. So you know, it used to be at 100K, you had to move 100K revenue, you had to move to the Pro or Plus license. That's gone. Like they
did that go?
Yeah, they stopped. I think that went up to 200K, or just it's not there at all anymore. So they actually expanded their free tier, which is lovely. And if they had just gone with a revenue share, I think most people actually would have been positive about this change, because as a hobbyist, it means you don't have that thing at the top anymore, and after it goes there, you just start paying 4%. People.
And if you're a hobbyist, the idea of making $1 million, what do I care? $1 million, you can take 5 cents on every dollar.
Right.
That's fine. And the people who have more established companies are also like, yeah, that's reasonable, that's fair, and it scales to your success, which is the point Rami's making, where there is a ceiling to that number. Right. It is very trackable. It's very understandable. There are metrics. I can't tell you how many people have installed Thomas Was Alone. I can tell you to a single person how many people have bought Thomas Was Alone.
Yeah.
Of course, I need to know that for bookkeeping, accounting, taxes, all this stuff.
I also don't know how often people have installed Thomas Was Alone. I've installed it like 45 times because you just keep releasing that thing.
I've also
but you've never fucking played it, Rami.
I played it so often. I have in-depth.
It's all he plays.
I have given Mike in-depth feedback on why I think the title is wrong.
It was so useful.
Yeah.
I've said on the show before. I've said on the show before that that like 5 or 6 of my games are specifically named to troll Rami,
right?
Because his criticism of Thomas Was Alone was that it should have been called Rectangles or something.
No, it was just
rectangles were alone.
Listen, Thomas is not alone in that game. Thomas was not alone in the game. I think I'm calling
narrative. That's how storytelling works. You also said it should have been about. You should have used the word rectangle square, because that's why then every game of mine is called a shape word. So volume, Earth shape, John Wick X.
It's just always the word that makes me the most angry. Like, volume is a game about being quiet. Why is volume a game about being quiet? Like, it's
the problem is now I work with Disney. I have to use good names.
Right. It's the indie formula.
So I can't play that trick anymore. It's
adjectivey noun.
Yeah.
That's the go-to.
That's the good mobile.
Yeah.
Anyway, for any mobile game that has that, please don't install it, because it's likely made in Unity.
Just buy it.
The main thing is, this is not a walk. You can't walk this one back.
No, I don't think so either. Trust.
It shows a lack of judgment, which is genuinely kind of upsetting to people.
The grapevine, real quick. So I understand that this has been in the work for over a year, but that per install was brought up, shot down internally to the point where everybody assumed it was not going to happen, and then announced. And that there was nothing in between that, as far as I can tell, the people I've talked to that work in Unity or work with people that work at Unity, the original response was just a combination of utter confusion and anger. And that it actually took a moment.
There's not an engineer at Unity, and there's a lot of engineers at Unity. There is not a single engineer at Unity who... They're amazing, world-class engineers. There's not a single one of them who thought that you could, with current technology, track installs of a game.
Right.
Not a single one.
Right. And further, to distinguish between different types of installs. Right.
Yeah.
That
is a 3-minute. That's the kind of conversation. And I'm boss of a studio. I walk into a room with my programmers every day and say something really, really stupid, and they say, "No, Mike, that's not possible." And I go, "Oh, that's a shame. Okay, fair play." And I move on. That's what you're meant to do. You're meant to be the boss who goes in and asks the professionals what can and can't be done.
My guess is that the boss who walked in here is maybe some, very corporate person who was only thinking about mobile.
Right.
The thing they were focused on exclusively.
But this still kills the mobile developers.
And install. Right. Oh, for sure. Oh, hello.
Yeah. I would understand this, to be clear. Like, I would understand if this was something that only negatively impacted indies, but really worked with the mobile people. I would understand. I'd be offended by it, but I'd understand it.
Yeah.
Because, we're disposable. We don't make anyone that much money. We're kind of the cool, interesting thing on the side, but mobile's where it's at. Yeah. If this was something that massively served the mobile developers and screwed us over, I would at least understand the reasoning.
Right.
Yeah.
But this straight up bankrupts mobile developers, especially free-to-play ones. And it also really screws over indies because we like giveaways, we like free updates, we like charity bundles, we like putting our games in bundles where you can pay what you want. Like all of these things are
we
now
all
just
got to the positions we are by being generous in that way,
Right.
and knowing when to, and a bit of self-interest, when to
course.
use those opportunities to talk about our games.
yeah.
It's just such
So-
a net negative for like the community, and it's part of why I really wanted to talk about this. Is I'm seeing game devs blow up about it, but I'm not really seeing gamers talk about it, and I don't know that they're currently aware of the negatives that apply to gamers as well, which are also tremendous.
Right.
And just the amount of studios who've had to post things like Megacrit posted regarding Slay the Spire that they've been working on a game for the past 2 years that's in Unity, and it's the first time they've ever had to say that they are going to change engines unless the changes are completely reverted. It's so nuts, and will probably delay a bunch of games. Like
And that's
just
one area which I am
unbelievable.
worried about, because I think the audience still thinks that you can take a game you're making in Unity and port it into Unreal. We see a tweet about that go viral
put
on
it in
Game Dev
Unreal.
Twitter every week.
Right.
Just chuck it into Unreal. This takes 2 months to put a game into Unreal. That is not the case, and I think players are going to be aware of that when people have to make difficult decisions about this stuff.
And it's strange because people think of engines as these sort of magical programs that sort of glue your game together, but really what it is it's sort of like a Lego box, right? It's these building blocks, and you can use or not use certain building blocks, but the building blocks you have shape what you build on top of it. So some engines are structured in specific ways, other engines are structured in other ways, but it's really hard to take the pieces that are yours from a Lego thing and then put them on a structure that is not built for that at all. It's like putting Lego.
You're
and
moving the
connects.
intellectual property. That's what you're doing. You've made a house in Lego, and you now have a design for a house, and now you're going to make it.
The
in
little
balsa wood.
circles are a different size.
Right.
Well, you just have to go and reinterpret everything you did, and it's going to have a massive impact. There's going to be delays. There's going to be a lot of cancelled games. Right. It's going to be a bloodbath.
Just to emphasize how big that statement is, that they're considering switching to another engine. What Mike said at the start is really true. An engine, as a framework, is something that developers get good at. You get good at Unity, right? Yes, absolutely. Being good at Unity means that if you start on Unreal, you're gonna have an advantage to somebody who has never used either, right? Sure. Like being a better game developer, doesn't matter what tool, is gonna make you a better game developer in general. But to learn what the quickest way is of doing something, what the most performant way is of doing something, what the safest way of doing something is, how you can best collaborate in a tool, how you can best export things on a tool, the methods of getting it on specific system, the specific quirks and bugs and weirdnesses, which way is up is genuinely a difference between engines, right? Like we did forward, up, left, right.
Points in a different direction, yeah.
They just point in different directions. Like everything changes. And
I think people don't get that necessarily. Like that game development is done in the margins. Like it's very like there's a lot of videos, and I always moan about these videos where it's like, I made Oblivion in a week. That kind of YouTube video of someone throwing some assets together in Unreal. To make a video game and have it run at like a solid frame rate on a
that's not just that tiny 2-second slice.
There are people. I have several someones, but I'm thinking of a particular person I work with. He has put a decade of his life into knowing exactly how to get great performance from Unity.
Yeah,
like he is the best. And when we put a build to him, and it comes back running beautifully on a lesser console, that's amazing. And that's something that makes that he's made a career around, and he's obviously very valuable because of that. And all of that knowledge, if I decide we're going to Unreal with our next game, he has to basically start from scratch. We are not talking about how to, loading up a tutorial and learning how to place a cube in Unreal. That's very learnable and trainable. But we are talking about people who have dedicated their careers.
You are essentially devaluing people's skills, and thus kind of hurting video games as a whole. Like, it feels like a strong word to use, but as a result, all these people who have these skills working in Unity are going to be worse at what they do. Again, I don't like the word worse, but you know what I mean. If they have to do it all on a new engine, thus making video games as a whole a bit worse for a while.
And I've seen the snide response from people of like, well, you shouldn't entrust everything to an engine. You should be, and it's like, well, we have to entrust everything to an engine.
Yeah,
like
it's
the game has to be
impossible not
in
to.
an engine. I made a bet that panned out quite well for 12 years.
Yeah.
And now this has happened. Like it's a tricky one. It's really tricky.
And the sort of the ripple effects of this are also huge, because if a studio like a Megacrit or anything like them would have to make that choice, would have to make that change, that affects their future output, right?
Yeah.
Their future output won't be as fast. Updates to old games will not happen because they're switching engines. Like, they're gonna have to eventually let go of Unity talent or retrain Unity talent, right? Those are really the only two options you have. Updates cost money now, which is also bad, right? If anybody reinstalls your game because you released an update, that's bad. So that's dangerous. They're probably closing their license with Unity to avoid that, so they can't even update the game if they wanted to. So there's going to be this inflection point if this continues on January 1st, where a whole lot of developers are going to choose not to work with Unity anymore at the first possible moment they can get that.
And it hurts everybody, just across the board, everybody. In theory, even Unity, because everybody will leave.
I mean, it's been a great day for
and then
Unreal.
that has a compound effect, like, because if Unity have shot themselves in the foot to the extent where this is actually going to damage their business, which I don't know if they have, I don't think anyone does yet. I don't know.
All right, Mike doesn't know. I know.
Mike doesn't know. Rami knows. I don't know. But if that's the case, then there's a real concern there of like, well, what about like future support? What about support for upcoming platforms? What about this? What about that? Like, there's those of us who are working on multi-year projects have to be thinking on a different horizon, and there's concerns there, which are obviously behind 3 or 4 different NDAs, but like there's lots of concerns coming up there as well, and it's going to have a big impact. It's one of those ones that we'll be seeing the outcomes of this week for quite some time.
Yeah.
It's
they've got to walk it back. They've walked back some things. It's now saying like they have a tweet that says it's not retroactive. Like some of it has
when's
been
that from?
They've been trying to claim that, but what they mean with not retroactive is they're claiming that their changes.
They're not judging for 10 years.
No, the basically I think they're trying to get out on a legal like specificity, which is effectively saying we're not actually retroactively applying anything. We're starting the terms on January 2024.
I see. You think they're being fancy.
That's what they did the
Legal
previous
language.
time they discussed that. But let me read what they have here, because the other thing is they just keep changing what they're saying.
And that's what makes it feel underprepared.
Again, I imagine this will continue to happen.
Yeah, but like for example,
think it has to be a full walk back, and I'm not even sure if that's enough.
My favorite one here is we don't count fraudulent installs or install bombing either. Great. Install bombing was not a phrase until 4 days ago, just for the record. It didn't exist.
Oh my God, yeah.
But now it's a word.
That's when you know you've messed up, is when there's a new negative term for an assumption about a bullying behavior that doesn't yet exist.
Right.
Yeah.
So we won't count fraudulent installs or install bombing either. As part of our model, we are creating solutions to address the problem of double clowning reinstallations.
Jeez.
Like, they're about to install something of which they do not have a technical implementation that every person that works in development can tell you is not possible, right? So
Wild.
This
is baffling.
There's an interest. Yeah.
Just top to bottom. It's very confusing. Though I do also want to note, apparently this happened today. When you look at Unity News, they got a credible death threat that forced 2 offices to close.
That's messed up.
Don't do that.
No,
Don't do
we
that.
don't
Don't
support
do that.
that.
No.
That's not what we're talking about here.
No.
That's fucking pathetic.
Yeah. No, that's kind of the other part. Like Mike said, there's a lot of amazing people at Unity. This is a company that was built on helping developers, students, people just starting, kids, make their first
and we
game.
often then hire those people in. So you've got a lot of that community. I think most of the people I went to that London drinks with 10 years ago now work at Unity. Like, it's 99% of the people at Unity do not deserve any disrespect or frustration.
There is too much of that, right? Like, this is one of the things that I keep yelling at on X.
Don't the second you start calling him that, don't call it X.
Okay, Twitter.
We don't do it.
On
Thank
Twitter. On
He
Twitter,
doesn't get to complain
Twitter
about
believing
pronouns
podcasts.
and then change the name of the brand and get upset
Right.
when people won't pay attention.
yeah, man.
X
But
in bio.
this is something that is important, like, and especially also as gamers sort of start to realize what the effects of this is going to be on the hobby, the medium, the games, the developers that they love. If this continues, it's not the right way to stop this by like yelling at people, by death threats, by any of that. Like, just in general, what we need to do is just make clear that this is bad for games. It's bad for game development. It's bad for the people that make the games you love.
Yeah.
Right. It's bad for the players. It's bad for everyone. There's literally nobody that wins here. And with the way this is panning out, even Unity is not winning. Like, literally nobody is winning here. Like, this is just utter and complete destruction and chaos. And for me, the saddest thing is just like, I really like Unity.
Yeah.
I really, really like Unity. I think Unity's mission in the games industry, Unity's achievements in the games industry, as Mike is saying, a lot of the people that started out in Unity as kids now are professional game developers. They're working in the engine. They're working on their games. They're running game studios. They're like people that took the leap into independent game development.
It was my generation's Super 8 camera. Like, it just it opened the door, and that's
It's sad.
That's what's tragic about this. Yeah. And a lot of good people work. A lot of people are currently resigning from Unity.
Yeah.
Do you guys see that the CEO pulled stocks out like quite recently before this was announced?
Not many though, right? I saw that going around. It wasn't
500 or something.
It was 2,000.
Massive.
Yeah.
No,
it wasn't like compared to what he has. That's not ridiculous.
It was like
I think that's been over. I think that's been overplayed.
I suspected so too.
To be honest.
That it may be
like
totally unrelated even.
1/25 or something. 1/25 of his.
Yeah, it's not nothing, but like, I don't know. That's not my complaint.
He's continuously been pulling out. He's been pulling out of Unity for a long time, which I never think is a good sign when your CEO
it's not a great sign,
CEO keeps selling stock in the company that they run.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Especially when your company has invented a new technology that can track the install of software.
That's the thing.
A very valuable company.
I swear to God, if they had developed that, Unity would stop existing tomorrow because they would pivot to selling that technology.
Yeah, you're right.
That would literally be the most valuable thing ever invented in technology.
It'd be like the guy who invented was it Velcro? No, it was Silly Putty, right? It was invented by someone who was trying to make an adhesive, and like he accidentally made. Oh, this is interesting.
That's kind of fun. Wild.
It's that.
I have to head off.
Crazy.
Obviously, we could talk about this forever, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. I also just wanted to apologize that, obviously there's a lot of feelings about this, so sorry if we miss bits of information. I feel like people are probably going to leave a bunch of stuff in the comments or like updates or whatever. It's obviously a developing story as well.
We also recorded this Thursday lunchtime LA time, so
record ahead of
anything that's happened
I
since
have
then,
no doubt there will be an update tomorrow as well.
Will be.
But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Rami. Where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter.
Thank you.
THA_Rami, but you can also just find me ramiismail.com. All my stuff is there. I write a newsletter about independent development. If you want to become an independent developer, it's a place you could look. I have a bunch of video games that you should buy, but absolutely not install. Just do not install.
Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
It was an absolute pleasure. What a weird time in video games.
What a great time we had. Mike, people know where to find you. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Should people install your games?
They should absolutely go and buy and install Tron Identity and then uninstall it when they finish playing, please.
Love that.
No, leave it on there. If they reinstall it because they want to try again,
you're right.
Yeah, leave it there forever. Never uninstall anything.
Never, ever uninstall and never upgrade. Do not upgrade your devices. Ever.
Just
God.
Switch off your computer until me or Rami lets you know otherwise. That's the rule. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for watching. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.